never partly dead. Briefly in the rain, Lieutenant Cross saw Martha's gray eyes gazing back at him. He understood. It was very sad, he thought, the things men carried inside, the things men did or felt they had to do. He almost nodded to her, but didn't. Instead, he went back to his maps. He was now determined to perform his duties firmly and without negligence. It wouldn't help Lavender, he knew that, but from this point on he would comport himself as a soldier. He would dispose of his good luck pebble, swallow it, maybe, or use Lee Strunk's slingshot, or just drop it along the trail. On the march, he would impose strict field discipline. He would be careful to send out flank security, to prevent straggling or bunching up, to keep his troops moving at the proper pace and at the proper interval. He would insist on clean weapons. He would confiscate the remainder of Lavender's dope. Later in the day, perhaps he would call the men together and speak to them plainly. He would accept the blame for what had happened to Lavender. He would be a man about it. He would look them in the eyes, keeping his chin level, and he would issue the new SOPs in a calm, impersonal tone of voice, an officer's voice, leaving no room for argument or discussion. Commencing immediately, he'd tell them, they would no longer abandon equipment along the route of march. They would police up their acts. They would get their shit together and keep it together and maintain it neatly and in good working order. He would not tolerate laxity. He would show strength, distancing himself. Among the men there would be grumbling, of course, and maybe worse, because their days would seem longer and their loads heavier. But Lieutenant Cross reminded himself that his obligation was not to be loved, but to lead. He would dispense with love. It was not now a factor. And if anyone quarreled or complained, he would simply tighten his lips and arrange his shoulders in the correct command posture. He might give a curt little nod, or he might not. He might just shrug and say, "Carry on." Then they would saddle up and form into a column and move out toward the villages of Fan Kay.
Dylan Baker read The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien. After that stirring reading, I had a chance to speak with our friend Tim from the studios at KUT Austin. So, Tim, it's 20 years since The Things They Carried first appeared. Does that amaze you?
It does. It feels a bit like, 1,000 years and a bit like yesterday.
How was that story conceived in its form? The idea of conveying the whole Vietnam grunt experience by means of listing what was in their pockets and packs and shoulders and necks.
The story came out of language itself, out of the first sentence. First Lieutenant Jimmy Cross carried letters, and the word carried, something tickled my fancy about the word. Because I was a soldier in Vietnam all those years ago, in addition to fighting a terrible, terrible war, there was this press of gravity on the body that began to translate to the press of gravity on the soul as well.
Well, one of the most wonderful things in this wonderful story is that point in which you make the leap from the listing of physical objects into the listing of other things like memory and guilt and unhappiness that the soldiers, quote, carried.
I did want to make the leap you just spoke about, and the movement between the physical burdens that soldiers carry, and that just was all of us carry through our lives, into the spiritual and psychological burdens we carry, was important to the story. It wouldn't be a story without that.
Do you think a similar or parallel story could be written about a platoon of grunts now in Afghanistan or Iraq?
Times change, of course, but some things about war are eternal. Fear and horror, a kind of wistfulness about what's not present, which is to say peace, that's carried through a war in addition to the things most people would think about.
Well, you certainly have contributed to America's understanding of it all by a wonderful creation like The Things They Carried. And thanks for talking with us here.
Thank you so much, Isaiah.
That was Tim O'Brien talking about his story, The Things They Carried. This reading is available along with a range of other war fiction on our CD, Wartime Lives. For more information, visit selectedshorts.org. Selected Shorts is produced by Catherine Minton and directed by Isaiah Sheffer. The executive director of Symphony Space is Cynthia Elliott. Our radio producer is Sarah Montague, and our production assistant is Miranda Schaefer. The readings are recorded by Miles B. Smith, and our mix engineer is Stu Kennedy. Major support for Selected Shorts is provided by Houghton Mifflin, publishers of the Best American Short Stories, edited in 2009 by Alice Sebold. Additional support is provided by the Dungannon Foundation, sponsor of the Ray Award for the Short Story, the National Endowment for the Arts, which believes that a great nation deserves great art, New York State Council on the Arts, a state agency, the Henry Nias Foundation, Lila Atchison Wallace Theater Fund of the New York Community Trust, and Warren and Jane Weiss and the Applebaum Foundation. Selected Shorts is a co-production of Symphony Space and WNYC Radio in New York and is distributed nationwide by PRI, Public Radio International.
Support for this program comes from this station and Public Radio International stations nationwide and is made possible in part by the PRI Program Fund, whose contributors include the Ford Foundation and the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation.
PRI, Public Radio International.
Hi, I'm Isaiah Sheffer. Greetings to our Selected Shorts podcast audience. If you've always wanted to be a selector of shorts yourself, here's your chance. On June 9th, 2010, Selected Shorts at Symphony Space in New York will feature published stories selected by you, our audience nationwide. Go to selectedshorts.org/favorite to submit your story suggestions. Then, in the spring, you'll vote for your favorite of the final contenders.